Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the opening reception for Cycles, Cynthia Back, and Phyllis Trout. I'm Sarah Kirk-Hanley, Manhattan Graphics Center's Executive Director. MGC's programs are made possible by grants from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, New York State Council on the Arts, the Pierre and Tana Matisse Foundation, the Sherman Foundation, and other individuals and organizations. Thank you so much for your support. Tonight, we are delighted to share the recent work of Back and Trout, who first met at MGC in 1992. Back is based outside Philadelphia and works primarily in woodcut. She has exhibited widely throughout the United States and is the recipient of numerous residencies and fellowships worldwide. Her work is in many private collections and public collections internationally. Learn more on her website, cynthiaback.com. Phyllis Trout is a painter, printmaker, and educator whose primary medium is Monotype. She has worked at Manhattan Graphics Center for decades. She exhibits widely, and her work is in international and national collections. She is also a teacher at Friends Seminary in New York City. In tonight's program, the artists will alternate speaking about their work. This is meant to be a casual reception. Unfortunately, we can't gather in person, so we encourage you to convey your thoughts and regards in the chat function, or you can also ask more formal questions in the Q&A function, and you can find both of those at the bottom of your screen. We will monitor questions. I will monitor the questions and interject when they're speaking if it's about the technique or the work at hand. But if you have a more philosophical question, we'll save it for the end during the discussion. And now, please welcome Cynthia Back and Phyllis Trout.
Well, I want to welcome everybody, but before I do that, also I'd like to say thank you to Cindy, and thank you to Sarah, and to Erica, who you can't see, who's been also putting this together. And thanks to all of you who've made time to come look at our work this evening. I'm going to just speak about the pieces and the inspiration of them, and as Sarah said, oh, and I'm Phyllis, I guess that's clear. As Sarah said, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and I would love to answer them. So we're looking at the first image, and it's entitled Babel. And yes, it refers to the ancient story of the Tower of Babel. And one of my big inspirations for that is, of course, Bruegel's beautiful painting in which the tower is sort of being swallowed by the earth, and all those beautiful colors. And so this is what really inspired me for this. It also has remnants of images of the petroleum tanks that's all up and down the East Coast. And this is a monotype that I have done watercolor on, and that is what I've been doing during the pandemic. I can't go to the print studio, which really feels difficult. I miss the community, I miss the presses, I miss that. But it's been very fruitful in being able to work back into these prints. A lot of these prints also are primarily the colored ink. This is the second one, Babel. As you can see, it's disappearing as well as emerging, and that's something that I play with a lot, is positive and negative spaces. And in my process, I use sort of matrix of perhaps a stencil or some drawing, and then I go back into it. Like the red, yes, and here's also another Babel that is actually more idea of perhaps the tower coming down, more askew. Yes, so next.
Okay. Hi, thanks everyone for coming this evening, and I particularly want to thank Phyllis for inviting me to do this exhibit with her. and to Sarah and Erica and Manhattan Graphic Center for hosting. So I've been doing woodcuts for approximately the last 10 years. All my work is landscape based, and I have two kind of concurrent themes, mostly trees, but all things that are very close to my home, and then traveling. So the first series of prints I'm going to talk about were done at an artist residency in Key West last year. So they're all reduction prints. And if you know reduction, in typical woodcuts, you use a plate for each color. Reduction, you use one plate generally, and just keep cutting away each color. I'll talk a little about process at the very end. But I got interested in the Keys in the mangrove swamps because I think mangroves are just the perfect tree. They're freshwater, but they live in salt water. They've adapted perfectly to this environment by pulling all the salt up into one or two yellow leaves, which then die and fall down and form soil and nourish their roots. And in their roots, shellfish and other fish take cover, and they protect all of the Keys from hurricane winds and things like that. And it was really obvious. Key West, where I was, is mostly built up. There's only mangrove swamps at the northern end of the island. And everywhere where they've done away, right, with the swamps, it floods. All the roads flood every day with the tides. So the swamps are really, really important. And I just, I kept on. I was fortunate to be able to get a kayak and go through, and I just was photographing constantly. So, okay.
Hi, this is, the title of this is Deir ez-Zor, which is a city in eastern Syria. And this comes from I traveled in the Middle East, and not to Syria, but nearby. And I was really entranced by the histories there, but also going there as a very privileged American. And then I thought that I'd be self-conscious about it, but when I got there and I saw the community and sense of identity, it was really eye-opening. And I didn't get to go to Syria, but I really wanted to. Also, the city is a city that's been photographed. It's been in the news, photographed. It's often photographed. And actually also the name of the city, Deir, actually means monastery, which I find quite ironic given that it has been really destroyed by this civil war. And it really is a process of seeing these geometric shapes of an urban landscape sort of crumbling and becoming, in a sense, more organic. And that's what I was trying to work with. And of course, you can see how I'm using stencils. And this is also entitled Deir ez-Zor. And it's watercolor and the monotype as well. And then the next one. This is part of my Bardo series, which some of you all may be familiar with, but it is a series that has I've been working on for a very long time of magnificent architectural spaces that I have studied, like the Hagia Sophia, but also train stations and prisons, Eastern State Penitentiary. These structures are fascinating for me for their histories, but also the spaces within them and how the light is inside of it. These are imagined spaces. There are architectural elements in them, but I'm fascinated by how space creates light. And the next one is, okay, why Bardo? Actually, I just saw the question. Why
and
Bardo?
there are some technical questions too.
Okay, Bardo Bardo refers to a transitional state. I've been meditating for years. I also teach at a Quaker school, and silence has been really a big part of my life. And actually that goes back to the Tower of Babel, because I feel like with that story, one of the most important things is, and for us now, is the capacity to listen. And the Bardo is about in between light and dark, sleep and awake, living and dead. And I find that sensitivity towards those transitional states has been something that's really helped me further my work. And also you can see in the work, there's industrial shapes as well. My father was he designed warehouses, and I spent a lot of time growing up in them, and I was fascinated by the scale. And I guess scale plays a very big part in my work.
So we have some questions. Liz Marafino asks and says, "Hi Phyllis, these are great. Are you using oil-based inks in the monotype?"
Absolutely. I have been, yes, they are monotypes, and that's also an interesting combination with the watercolor. I like that, and they're both, I use them both extremely transparently, and that layering I really, really love. But the definitely oil-based ink. I struggle with water-based ink. I teach with it, and I love oil-based ink.
And one more from Jean Betancourt. Phyllis, how much is monotype and how much is watercolor prints you have done previously or access to press at home?
I don't have access to a press at home. And most of the color in the Babel series, a lot of it is watercolor, but I really did not add a lot of watercolor. It was also something that because it's watercolor, you can add and you can actually dissolve it and get rid of it. So I like that sort of forgiving nature of it. So it's not that much watercolor, mostly ink.
Okay, and then Liz, you saw that, had asked why Bardo, and I think you addressed that, but I'm wondering if the term has some meaning.
Well, the term comes from the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and I would not say that I'm a Buddhist, but I would say that I have been doing and studying meditation, and that is descriptive of that sort of open space, and it's liminal in that it's open, and it has I guess that's similar to what happens when I am able to work in the studio. There's an openness that happens as well.
Okay, I live in a heavily wooded area. It's a narrow strip surrounded by developments, and there's a creek and woods and a park. And the last year or so, a lot of the old trees have come down, either been cut down or fallen down. And so I've been recording them. This particular print, it's hard to get the scale, but this one's quite large, and it's actually 3 prints that I kind of collaged. So the top left and top right are individual prints, and then the bottom is another print. And I did a lot, and I was playing around with juxtaposition and things of individual prints, and then ended up with this particular collage of a tree that is actually in my front yard. It cracked at the base and stood up in the air for about 1.5 years because it got caught in another tree, and then one day it finally came down. But by that time, it had been dead for so long that it was really covered in all these wonderful lichen. So you can go ahead. Okay, and this is part of the same, but this one is a really tiny little print. So, yeah.
So now we're in my front yard, which is Gowanus. It's where I live, and Gowanus is also the name of the Native American tribe that once lived here, and through the Gowanus is it's the actually Mount McKinley of the New York City subway station, of the F train, Smith and Ninth. And so you get these vistas of not only Manhattan, but of Brooklyn. And the Gowanus is extremely industrial, I guess less so now. And one of the stories that I love also about the Native Americans is that as prisoners, when the Dutch women were imprisoned by the Native Americans, they were actually, they wrote in their diaries of how they were treated better as prisoners than actually as women in their society, which I think is just a really interesting fact. And you can see here too how the ink gets kind of blobby. I use stencils, and some of them are very old, some of them are even decades old. And I like how the densities change, and it really makes wonderful layering and opacities and a feeling of distance, which you really get when you're on the F train. Probably some of you know that train. So maybe the next one, which is also Gowanus. Yes, the layering. So next.
Recently, I've started making black and white woodcuts, and I'm kind of, for me, I'm kind of shocked by how difficult I find it compared to color. I did a lot of black and white in college, and I hadn't done any since then. So black and white is about mark making. Every single stroke of the knife becomes, you know, it's drawing with a knife really. And I'm finding it very challenging, and I'm really intrigued by it. I started off with the Big Ink project, which is a guy who's going around the country doing enormous prints with people. And so I've done several very, very large prints, like 60 inches. But this series, you can go on to the next one. These are two that are close to my house. This is like the view in the park, and I have a lot in this exhibition, standing in pretty much the same spot, where the creek, this is Darby Creek that runs down to the Philadelphia airport and into the Delaware River. This particular area was hit in the hurricane of 1961, I think, and it had gone straight, and there was a small dam, and it just jumped the dam and made this enormous circular bend, which keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year since then. And the dam is still there. It's now maybe 50 feet from where the creek is, but it's just, yeah. I'm there a lot, so.
I find those marks so amazing, Cindy. I really think it's just incredible. Cindy, I have to say, as an artist, Cindy's tenacity is what really inspires me, and always has. I feel like she has a persistence in seeing and in just working things through that continually gives me hope. And you know, especially when you get discouraged, because printmaking can be very technical, and I just really appreciate that. I think
so yeah.
So this is another Bardo, again with a bit of perhaps a church interior with some disappearing, and pretty much all of this, there is a little bit of watercolor, but very, very minimally so. And the next one is actually, this is almost the opposite, meaning that I really used a lot of gouache on this one, really experimenting. I had a sort of orthodoxy that I was unfortunately pursuing because it was really enabling my internal critic and inhibiting me, but because I felt like, you know, whatever gets put on, I love the transparency, and you know, the whole idea of going back and not only reworking, but creating the light with the paint. I really wanted to try to create the light with the paper from behind it, like fresco and photography. I had that as a goal. And I wouldn't even say as a goal, but I think it kind of inhibited me. And with this one, you can see I've really pulled out the gouache and have really begun using the white to create and cover and make space. And that's actually in great contrast to the one before. So.
Okay, these are a very small little series that I did. It's actually the same Darby Creek, but it's down actually in John Hines National Park, which is down by the airport. And at one time, this area of Pennsylvania had like huge wetlands, hundreds of thousands of acres. And now I think it's a few hundred or a couple of thousand acres, but you can do a 4-mile walk there. And so I go there often. And I love all the reeds, and this was like in the autumn that I did this particular print. And the next one is also, I always work in series. I just like to pursue one idea. And actually, this particular print, I'm very happy with it, but I had done the same print in a different way. And when you're working on reduction prints, the order that you print is extremely important. And I got done with the first print, and it was okay, but it did not work for me. So, but I liked the colors and the composition of this enough that I just started all over, which I do frequently. Because you learn from, okay, it didn't work when I was printing it in this order, but if I try it this way, it might, it might work a lot better. Because in the first one, I lost the creams and the reds because every color is influenced by the colors that are underneath it. So you have to be careful of that.
Cynthia, we have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Ellen Wise.
Oh, yeah.
You always do wonderful things with water and reflections. How do you translate from color to black and white for those effects?
Well, it's hard, but because black and white, you don't even have grays for tone and things. But I'm trying to use my marks to create tonal gray areas. And also, I think when I'm carving, I'm always trying to become whatever it is that my subject matter is. So if I'm carving water, I try to be water. I know that sounds a little crazy, but if you're thinking water all the time, you're going to carve, all your marks are going to follow that, the wave or the patterning of reflected. So that's what I try to do, and it's all kind of intuitive. So.
Another one, I think you addressed that a bit just recently, but can you tell us more about the color sequence? You did address that in terms of maybe trying certain colors and which orders are most effective, but maybe the question is more about exactly the sequence, for example,
Sure.
the print in front of us.
Right, usually in a reduction print, you start with the lightest colors first. And the colors maybe that you want to be the brightest, because the closer to the paper that you are, the paper reflects the color. And so, but I go back and forth. So for instance, in this print, I have a lot of oranges and kind of taupey browns. They might actually have been exactly the same color. Like the brownish color might be a lot more orange on my palette, but I might be printing it over, say, the green or something. So I play with that a lot because I want really subtlety in colors. And so some of the ways is going back and forth. And a lot of it is, I think a lot of people that do reduction prints really plan them out. But if I plan something out, totally, I kill it. So I like improvisation, and so it does mean that I go, I wish I carved more of this color, so I have to go back, but it also then creates a lot of nuances of color because of all the tone and layering that I do.
Right. And to that issue of layering of colors, we have another question. Do you use masks on your color woodcuts?
Some, so yes, sometimes. I don't always print the entire thing one color because that's a waste of ink and build up. And so I might say if I'm doing a more traditional landscape that definitely has a sky and it definitely has a ground, I might tape off or just wipe away and just, you know, do the sky area and all the various layers of clouds or things, and then do the landscape area separately. Or maybe I might have just a little area that's one color. I have a print at the end that walks you through the layers, and in that one I particularly I had lots of areas that were maybe just a little square, and I taped that off and rolled it. So yeah.
Okay, that's it for technical questions for you for now.
Right.
So we can move on to Phyllis.
Okay, so we are back in the Bardo in these larger structures, and this is a little bit larger print with some watercolor next. And this one actually, I want to say something too about Cindy's process. I think something that we share is that the way that we really have an idea, perhaps, but then as we work, the material really speaks to us and leads us. And I find it just amazing how she can do her prints and the colors that way with the layering. Mine is all done with the printed color, at least, is all done in one shot. I don't reprint. I don't go back to it. So I'm amazed by her process. And this one too actually reminds me of my feeling of when I was in Rome and saw those parts of buildings sticking out of the earth. There's just something about that it's the buildings coming out of the earth in that way. It's very, very provocative for me, and this print reminds me of that. So next.
Okay. Well, before we move on, we have a few questions for you, Phyllis. So one is, are you using brayer with the gouache? This is from Jean.
No rollers. It's all, no.
Another one is, what type of paper do you use?
I've been using BFK and also Arches cover, white generally. And I have to say something about Cindy's next print. It is enormous, and I wish that we could see it in person. I gotta say that. I haven't seen it in person.
Well, it's one of my larger ones. It's 46 inches by 29, and it just fits on my press, barely. And so this is a print that I spent this summer carving. I actually, so Shenandoah is Shenandoah National Park and Skyline Drive in Virginia. We've gone there often, and there's numerous waterfalls, all one more beautiful than the next. So I just think of water as such a metaphor and its explosive power, and waterfalls, of course, are just very, I mean, you know, they start off as a trickle, and then the power of them is just fabulous to watch. I did a series of smaller color prints, and then after I did those, then I tackled this larger one. So.
We have a question about the wood and paper that you prefer to use.
Well, I prefer chinois, Japanese wood, but it's very expensive. And so for larger prints, this is birch ply. And I use all kinds of paper. this is Arch's cover because it comes 60 inches tall, or yeah, I think it's 60 inches. But I use a lot of origami, additioning papers, bamboo paper, hosho, but I also use Reeves BFK. I discovered a paper that I really like that only comes 15 by 18 as far as I know. It's called Hein, I think it's pronounced, H-E-I-N-E. It's a German paper and it's made just for relief prints. So.
Okay, thank you. That's it for questions for now.
This print is the city, and also the next one is the ocean. And this is one thing that's really wonderful in getting older, is to allow yourself permission. And also in this pandemic, I've been really doing a lot more landscape painting and really wanting to do it and to be outside observing. And I have done that some, but I've done it now more with watercolor. So these two smaller works are really products of that, and these are prints. I don't even think this has, it says it has watercolor on it. I think that's not true. I mislabeled that. I think this is just, it's
It
just
looks like a print, yeah.
Yeah, it's just and I just really love I love the ocean, and I have allowed myself to paint the ocean. I've spent a lot of this summer being in my backyard, painting the backyard. So it's exciting to be able to go in these ways.
So several years ago, I was fortunate enough to have an artist residency in Dalen, Norway for 2 months. It was the most amazing experience. I had the best studio I've ever had. They had a press that was just for me. And it's on a mountainside overlooking a fjord, and right outside the door practically was about 8 miles of forest trails and mountains to climb. And they're kind of planted forests with one kind of tree, but light almost never got in there, and they were really enchanted places for me. I spent a lot of time there. Next. So I did a series of, I think, 5 prints of the woods. Okay, so yeah, and it's all right. These are all 2-plate and 3-plate reduction prints. This was a new thing that I thought, well, if you go away, you have to try something new. So using a couple of plates allowed me to keep color even pure and work out. So it's a whole nother problem, because overprinting, then you can create a third color by, like the yellow and the blue can create a green. But you have to remember, don't carve this away until after you do this. So that was fun and challenging for me. Okay.
So this is yet another Bardo, and this has a bit of watercolor on it, and it does have the white gouache, which you can see. And these are imagined spaces that I go into. I have to say too, I particularly respond to Cindy's, I love those forest prints, and I got to see her, I think we FaceTimed when you were over there, and I got to see the space and the press, and it was really exciting. And I think you've done such a beautiful job in bringing that enchantment to us.
Thank you.
Next.
So this is from part of a whole series. I did a lot of trees cut down in my neighborhood, and this one I was having fun. So it's 1 plate that I printed reduction 4 different ways. So it's a small edition of 5. I printed, so for each one, I went through the reduction process using different colors and a lot of times even the same colors, but different, different layering. So I might do the orange and the violets, but I might start with the violet on one and then the orange on the other. And then I pasted them together. So it's something that I want to do a lot more of, not necessarily all in one print, but just try what happens when you do several different ways and come up with a couple of editions perhaps that are totally different because you've printed in a different order. Thank you.
I'd just like to break in because we have a question for Phyllis about what type of plates she uses for the monotype.
Oh, these are all done on the backs of litho plates, and the litho plate is a very thin aluminum plate that's smooth. I really like the reflective surface, and I also enjoy recycling. You know, you can make different sizes, so I like the surface, the way that the material sits on it. You can really get a feeling for how much is there. So yes, so that's what that is. And here we are back again, imagining the images of Syria. We can go to the next one as well. And again, it's about where the light is and how it's showing the architectural structures of the city. And to me, there's such a beauty when the light is coming from above, and also the real devastation. I was, like I said, I didn't go to Syria. I was in the West Bank and Israel and Jordan, and spent some time in Turkey, got to see the Hagia Sophia. So, but the Middle East has really always been a compelling place for me. So next. And next. This one I particularly feel fond of because of the transparency that happened with the solvent and the color here. It's sort of the light goes, you can tell it feels like it's in front and it's behind. And I find that moving.
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
Both getting a lot of wonderful feedback. I hope you're seeing in the comments.
No.
I don't want to read them out loud because I don't want to break your stride,
Okay.
but
Okay.
please take a look when you have later on, when you have time. And I think are we getting toward,
yes, we have
toward
the end here, and we'll open it up to discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I was supposed to have a show locally where I live, and it was going to be a really large show, so I had about 45 pieces in it, and I concentrated on making a body of work that was just about where I live, which I've always done, but these are all new. And so these are views out my studio. This one, it's one window, and then the next one, and another out at the other, another window, obviously different seasons. So all reduction. Okay.
Mm.
And this is the first black and white that I did. So, and it's actually the largest. And this is just a view across the street from my house. So that I walk every day.
Yes, another monotype with a lot of transparencies, as you can see, and also spraying some water, getting the sort of sparkly effect. Next. Wow. Another Bardo. I find the arches so inviting and compelling, the arches and the tunnels. And again, yeah. Anyway, and the Hagia Sophia is a very, very big influence on me. I spent a week there teaching and being able to actually go there, and I felt very, it was very exciting for me to finally get there and to see that structure, and Istanbul, beautiful architecture there. So next.
Okay. So this is just water and autumn reflections on the water. And the interesting thing about looking at work this way for me is that when we were going to have the show at Manhattan Graphic Center, it's a relatively small space, so it was going to be all fairly small work. But because it's online now, you know, you could put in, I mean, I put in a lot of large work and small work, and but on a screen it almost reads as the same size, which is somewhat odd.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the same spot on the creek, only a different season as the black and white prints that you were seeing earlier. Okay.
I just wanted to comment on the issue of scale.
Yeah.
If you do visit the website, you can zoom in a lot more than we are able to here tonight. So I encourage everyone, you can see more detail. And also, of course, maybe get it, I mean, online you can never get a sense of scale. You have to look at the dimensions and sort of imagine it.
Right. So this one and the next one are portraits of two trees that have come down recently. This particular tree was like a 300-year-old oak, and it came down in an ice storm and took, while I was making the print, it took the whole wall that you see here with it. So this is my backyard. It doesn't exist anymore. But anyway. Okay, so I brought a few of these really quickly to kind of show my process. This print isn't in the show, but this is from a print I did. It's 2 plates I was using. And you can see in this one that I'm just printing. So I have 2 plates. So the gray on the top is a second plate that I introduce. And then I blocked off little areas of color and just printed those colors. And so, so then I'm the 2 plates playing with each other on the bottom, and then, okay. Okay, and then you can see it building, and then that's the gray plate, so grays and blacks, and then that's the final print when I had little bits of dark green for the trees and black over the architecture. So, okay, well, that's the last one. Thanks.
It's nice to see that. Oh, let me put my video on. It's nice to see your process, and that was really helpful, even though it's not in the exhibition, to kind of understand how you work and how it suddenly pops right at the end there. So yes, we have some more philosophical discussion questions here or comments we can discuss for the next 15 minutes. One of them is from Ellen Wise. You both seem to focus in different ways on the relationship between the natural environment and the built environment created by humans. Please comment.
We do. I think, you know, when Phyllis and I met, we had this natural affinity. Our work is very different, but there's an awful lot that ties us together in terms of the way we think about things, the way we approach our work. And so I think, you know, in terms of doing, Phyllis does more architecture usually, and I do more nature, but you can't, the human made is everywhere. And its imprint.
Yeah, I think that also I like the nature in the architecture, meaning that, and thinking of time in a very large scale, like when I first saw Rome, going back to that moment of like, wow, or when I was in Utah in the desert and looking at those structures and just, we're nothing, we're like a grain of sand. And so it's like, you take time and you go in and out like that. To me, I find that relationship amazing and very, very inspiring. And I love Cindy's work, how abstract it was. I love seeing your process in that, no, so it's amazing, because also going from abstract to representational, which is something we both actually also both play with a lot.
Right, right. But I love the abstraction of yours, and I always strive that way. And I do kind of play in between, but yeah. Any more questions?
Oh, can't hear you, Sarah. You're muted.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We have more questions about the nature of sketches in your work. This is from Jean Betancourt. And do you keep sketches? How do they inform your process, etc.?
Well, I do sketch, but I've been mostly working from photographs for the reduction prints, because that gives me something. And I feel like when I'm working on a print, each color I'm redrawing, because I do a drawing, but it gets lost. And so I'm constantly redrawing. But I think my work is a combination of photograph, sketching, and then constantly going out and looking at the actual subject.
Yeah, and I'm sketching all the time, more so now. I have just tons and tons of sketchbooks, and I use a lot of ink. My work has been more black and white, and of recent, I've been really using more color, and that's been really exciting for me. But the sketch is definitely for composition, and I also do use photographs. I would say I'm more inspired by photographs, like I said, from news, and I tend to also really love architectural drawings and photographs as well.
Great. There was a comment from Ellen Wise as well that, Phyllis, your work, you describe it as architectural, but she was saying also it was more evocative to her, or maybe both, as machinery and architecture. Yeah. Can you comment on that?
I don't know, maybe going back to the being inside of the warehouses, but and also man's sort of bravado, going back to Babel actually too, you know, just in skyscrapers, just that sort of, we think we can our relationship to nature. I don't know if I'm answering the question right. Does that make sense about machines and people? I don't know.
Yes, I had a question too about that particular imagery. It's so different from the gestural images that the gestural work, the more open flowing mark making. And can you comment on how you are able to achieve that more delineated and structural imagery in the work when you're working in the medium of monotype?
Well, I do, like I said, I have a lot of stencils, and the stencils have come from my drawings, and I also really mask a lot. I use, and that's why I like the oil-based ink, because it's very forgiving, it doesn't dry fast, and you can really work with it. And I just really love that. I love having my hands literally filthy in the ink, and I just like pushing it around, and I use a lot of paper, the edges of paper, to make a sort of a sharper edge. And again, the stencils over time start to look like, they almost look like leather. They're kind of mottled, and they get they create really beautiful texture. So that's how it works.
Okay. Cynthia, you talked a lot about traveling, and can you tell us more about how travel is important to your creative process?
Well, I'd be traveling all the time if I could. Yeah, seeing new colors, new landscapes, definitely inspires me. And for me, going on artist residencies has been probably the best way, because I'm spending at least a month or longer in any one environment and looking at it every single day, not as a tourist, hopefully. And being in different environments kind of also sort of, you know, you're comfortable where you are, and moving to a new place makes you sort of almost question everything about what you're doing, and rethink your process and who it is you want to be, what you want to do. So it's invaluable for me.
Great. Yes, although no longer a practicing artist, I know what you're saying. I love to travel too, and it just always gives you a new perspective on life and everything that you assume.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our final question will be about your friendship, and how the two of you were drawn to each other. I think it's clear here and today in your talk, and also I encourage everyone to look at the exhibition text that the two artists prepared that kind of explains the symbiotic relationship that connects their two bodies of their practice, their individual practices, which is quite evocative. And there's a quote from T.S. Eliot there about, in fact, it goes to your point just now, Cynthia, about, you know, you travel and you come back in a circular, I mean, I'm butchering this quote from T.S. Eliot, but the point being that when you go on a journey and come back to the same point, you don't see it the same way again. Right. And the two of you, I think, do have a philosophical, there's a resonance between your philosophies. So please comment further and how you were drawn to become friends and exhibit together. And oh, one more, is this your first exhibition together?
We should have been doing it for years. So this has been our opportunity. I can say, seeing Cindy in the print studio at Manhattan Graphics, I was just really taken with her energy and just her presence. She really is awake and uses the material and just isn't afraid of making mistakes. And I think that's something that I really am inspired by, of how she really is just committed to it. And I love talking to her. And even though she's been in Philadelphia, I've been up here, I feel very connected and very grateful.
Yeah, and I started, my first printmaking class was actually at Manhattan Graphics Center. And so I would come in with Vijay Kumar, and I would come in for the workshop, and I think on Saturdays, Phyllis was always there. And I had a lot of questions, and because I was a total novice, and Phyllis was always there to answer my questions, and I was just really inspired by her process, her work. And didn't you always wear headphones when you were working? Yeah, you always had your headphones on.
Boundaries.
Like, because this was your day, you know. You were, and so yeah, we were really attracted to each other's energy. Yeah. And so we just started talking, and then we found out that we had a lot in common besides art, many things.
West Missouri. I went to school in Missouri. She's from
yeah.
Which
so.
I loved going to art school with not farmers, but people from the Midwest. I had a real resonance with that. After going to art school on the coast, I felt like, oh, wow. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all agree that this is a wonderful exhibition, and we're so glad that you did the work to prepare to present it online in this time when we are all art starved. And it's been wonderful to hear your thoughts and to be able to connect here. Like I said, there are so many great comments in the chat and Q&A. So I encourage both of you to, when you have time, go back and take a look at the comments. We'll send them to you. Then I would just like to close by thanking everyone who joined us this evening. And special thanks again to Cynthia and Phyllis for taking the time and sharing their ideas with us tonight. Cycles will be on view on MGC's website through September 30th. Please visit, as I said, to see their artist statement and to magnify the images and see more detail than we were able to show this evening. And I would just like to remind everyone that they are all available for purchase at very reasonable prices. Manhattan Graphics Center will continue to deliver online programs until we can safely reopen to the public and welcome crowds back to our space. Look for future events on the website and or via the email inbox if you're on our mailing list. If not, please consider joining. And also we, of course, welcome donations within your means so we can continue to deliver these events. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks again to Phyllis and Cynthia. Congratulations on a really outstanding exhibition.
Thanks.
Thank you. Be well.
Thank you.